Welcome, and thank you for joining me today. I'm so grateful to have you here, sharing in this space of growth, healing, and transformation. If you've already subscribed to Loving Everything, thank you for being a part of this beautiful community. Your support means so much, and together, we're creating a space where love in all its forms can be explored and embraced. As you listen to this episode, if it resonates with you, I invite you to like the video and share it with anyone who might benefit from the insights we're diving into today. These conversations are all about expanding our capacity to love ourselves, each other, and the world around us. And if you enjoy what you hear, don't forget to explore my other episodes where we journey into love's deepest, most unconditional forms. Each one is an invitation to reconnect with the parts of yourself that are waiting to be seen, healed, and loved. So thank you for being here. Let's begin. Hi, David.
Hello.
I'm so glad that you came and joined me. Thank you so much for making the time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Yeah. And we can start with how we met, if you'd like. I was actually, I think I was in Hillsdale, which is here in Portland area. And I saw, I believe, your flyer in the window of the tea and the coffee shop that you and I ended up meeting at for the first time. But at the time, I was in conversation with a number of people in my life about Vipassana. And so I saw your offerings. I looked you up, and then I asked for us to meet. I think you remember that as well. We sat and talked for a while and had a conversation about Vipassana and whether or not I felt ready and or prepared for an undertaking of that. And for people who are not familiar with Vipassana, you probably are going to be able to describe it a lot better than I will, but it's a silent meditation, generally for at least 7 days, correct?
Well, Vipassana refers more to just a meditation practice. So you could do Vipassana for 10 minutes at home, but oftentimes what people refer to when they say like they're going to do a Vipassana retreat, they mean these 10-day courses by this guy, S.N. Goenka, who it's very regimented and silent and body scans, but it's actually a very kind of broad thing. But that's, I think, what we were speaking about, those retreats.
Yes. And that I was looking for somewhere to go, which you recommended Cloud Mountain. You got me introduced to a lot of awesome teachers like Kamala. So I was really appreciative for all of the things that you kind of led me to at that point in my life. I didn't end up doing the retreat because COVID happened, but I did have it planned. Yeah. And so either way, I've been following you all of these years through your really beautiful newsletter. When I spoke of you earlier, just for a short clip for Instagram, I really meant I feel like you're a incredible human being. And I know I don't know you super intimately, but I'm always very inspired by the information that you provide and the journeys that you experience and witness within yourself and with others. So I'm really excited about sharing how you've cultivated this, because it's been a journey. And for just to start, I mean, your journey has been incredible. You were struggling with ADHD. You had depression. Can you fill us in on approximately what time in your life, how old you were when this was happening? Was this early in your teenage years? Was this
Yeah, I would say some of the backdrop of that. I mean, ADHD was since I was a little boy. I got psychological testing when I was 6, and I was in the like 99.99 percentile of ADHD. Actually, a funny story, when I got tested, the psychologist let me do whatever I wanted. So I was crawling under the table, tying his shoelaces together, walking around the room, and he just said to my mom, "We haven't run the numbers yet, but your child definitely has ADHD." So I started early. I was on meds for a number of years, but there were a bunch of side effects to those, so kind of went off of them in high school. And there was a pretty immediate drop off of my performance in school and grades. And around that time, also just coming of age a little bit more into my adult self, I grew up in an evangelical Christian home, and that was just the water I swam in. And was kind of dawning on me around 12 or 13. It didn't really do it for me. It didn't make sense to me. I didn't really agree with it, but had no real outlet for those consenting opinions or dissenting opinions. And so essentially what I see now, I was really quite depressed during those years, but didn't realize it. I spent most of my time just playing video games and watching TV and just doing the bare minimum to get by in school. And I was always pretty bright, so I didn't need to do a lot to like get passable grades. And then when I went to college, that transitioned to just a lot of drinking and partying, and but the form of essentially avoiding my life was pretty similar. But there was a sort of kind of strange facet to that. At that time in college, I started to really care about school and life. And so I would try really hard in school, but with the ADHD, I couldn't actually pay attention in a lecture. So I would sit and read every textbook cover to cover, but I would get distracted so much, it would take me a really long time. So I essentially didn't really have much free time because I would divide it between my studies and then partying. And that was kind of, I worked too, but that was really my life. And somewhere along there, I think when I was 19, I read a book from the Dalai Lama on the art of happiness, which was when I was starting to get interested. I'm like, well, I don't know, this life I'm living, I don't really know what's going on or what's wrong, but I'm just not actually that happy. And I think there's got to be something more. So I just went on to, at that time, Amazon, when it was still just a little book publisher. I just typed in happiness. And the first selection was from this guy, the Dalai Lama, who I'd never heard of.
You'd never heard of the Dalai Lama?
Never heard of the Dalai Lama. I grew up in a very sheltered Christian world where I was kind of right on the cusp. I'm 39 now, so the internet age was still not that big back then.
Yeah.
And so I'd never heard of him, but I liked the title, The Art of Happiness, and it was the number one option. So I was like, sure, we'll try that out.
Okay.
And that kind of I was still enmeshed in those habits for a number of years, but it just set the possibility of something different, which slowly I started reading more, learning more. I was working at a natural foods co-op, which a lot of information coming about diet and alternative lifestyles, and just slowly some changes really started to happen, and realizations about some of the habits that weren't serving me. And then that kind of set the stage to really work a bit more directly on those things like the shame and the ADHD, the depression, and so on.
You just answered like my first 3 questions. That's awesome. It's like you read my mind. Okay, so what was the moment or realization that made you to decide to sell everything and fully commit to a spiritual path?
Yeah. Well, so let's see. I graduated college when I think it was 22 or 23, kind of right around there. And that last year I had in college, I just had this sense that, as I was kind of sharing, my life wasn't working. And I think some of it was the social circles I ran in that weren't really serving me. The alcohol certainly wasn't serving me. And I just felt like I was in a bit of a rut and just felt this void in my life. And I had this feeling I just need to leave. I feel like I can't do it here. I'm too enmeshed in my habits and my patterns and my rhythms. And so I had done a semester abroad during college in Latin America. The semester was split between Nicaragua, El Salvador, and Guatemala. And it was very experiential, not so much in the classroom, a lot going into communities, learning about sustainable development, social change, history, more of like a down-to-earth economics as opposed to this really intellectual version. And it was the most alive I'd ever felt in my life. And so I said, well, I better go do that again. And so when I graduated, I moved to Mexico, southern Mexico, and I did about a year of volunteer work, social justice work. I was working with microcredit projects with communities and coffee communities. Awesome. But then towards the end of that year, I had this realization, oh, this isn't working either. I'm still just feel this void. And it was I can't quite say it was a rock bottom moment because I wasn't super depressed or anything, like I wasn't falling apart, but it was just this sense, this isn't working.
Yeah.
Like, can check this off the list.
Yeah.
Like, finding some passionate outlet for work or service isn't the thing. And, I then was thinking about all of these books I'd read and some of the yoga and meditation practices I dabbled in over the years. And the next day I was in Oaxaca, a city in southern Mexico, and I saw this flyer on the wall for a month-long yoga intensive. And it felt like a synchronicity. I was like, I'm going to do this. It was pretty close to where I was living. So I went and did that and just had a really profoundly opening experience, some real life-changing insights. And after that, really I see that there was a specific insight I had there, kind of the turning point of my life, where it was very clear the present moment is it. Like right here, this is it. All this stuff about past and future and identity and self and thoughts and emotions, they're all just fantasies. And there was something more wordless and more timeless that I knew existed in my own being. And so really since that moment, now about 15 years ago, all I've really been interested in is spiritual practice. And so although when these sorts of insights come, if our life isn't already pretty wholesome and put together in alignment with that, there can be a pretty rocky integration period.
Yeah.
And so the next few years after that, I shortly thereafter moved to Portland and running a small business with a friend who I just kind of joined him in what he was doing. It was just a way to kind of pass time while I essentially started to really take on a very serious yoga practice. Reading a lot of books, spilled into a very serious meditation practice, and becoming more integrated little by little. And after about 3 years of that, I had also had this idea. I was like, I think something big is going to happen at some point. So I was just living very frugally and saving up money. And then after about 3 years, just was like, okay, I think it's time. I want to go on some spiritual journey. I don't know how long it's going to last. I don't know where I'm going to go, but I'm just going to get rid of everything except what I can fit in a backpack. And I shipped a couple boxes of stuff to my parents in Wisconsin. I was like, oh, these are sentimental value or whatever. But yeah, and then I just started to map out a journey, which ended up being about 4 years. And so that was kind of how I got there.
Where did you go?
Yeah, so I started at the Upaya Zen Center in New Mexico. And I wasn't totally sure at this point what exactly my path was supposed to be, but I knew it was something in this Eastern spirituality, something yoga, Buddhism, meditation. And I'd heard really good things about this center and looked them up. And on a more practical level, they were one of the only residential Buddhist or yoga centers in the United States that at that time, they didn't charge you to be there. It was kind of an exchange. Like you essentially give service to the center, you help them run the kitchen or whatever, and then you get to do all the retreats for free and be part of the daily schedule. And so that was a big draw too. So I went there for 4 months, and yeah, that was a really powerful experience of living in a small community of other spiritual practitioners. And the daily rhythm when we weren't in intensive retreat was about 3 hours of meditation a day. And then you would have the intensive retreats with maybe like 8 or so. And yeah, just something about living in a healthy community with other spiritual practitioners and some really wonderful guides who would just call me out and like, well, why are you doing this? Or like, don't be so hard on yourself. Just to have that sort of maturity around you, around me, was really powerful. But I did that. And I had previously done several intensive meditation retreats in the Vipassana Theravada tradition, which were more intense than the Zen style at Upaya.
Yeah.
And at that time, young man in my 20s, I just wanted to be as intense as possible. And I was like, this isn't intense enough. I want more meditation.
Why? Why do you think that was?
I think I had this idea at that time that meditation was the point of it all. So I want to go to the place I can just meditate all the time without being burdened by chores and duties and all these extraneous other things. I just want to meditate. And I really liked meditating too. So I was like, just want to do this. And I think there's too something about, on a more philosophical, ideological level, the level of the teachings, I just resonated a bit more with the Theravada Vipassana teachings. They're a little bit more down to earth and practical, whereas Zen can be a little bit more like poetry, kind of just designed to confuse you. And so, I just didn't quite connect as much with the actual teachings. So after that, I then went to Asia for a year, and I did some traveling and just kind of sightseeing, but mostly it was just moving in and out of retreats and trainings. And I did some long retreats in Nepal and Malaysia, and one in Thailand, did some yoga trainings. I did the big one, I did a 2-month very intensive Vipassana retreat in Nepal that year in spring. It's actually their hot season. And that was very opening, and that was a really good sign, like, oh yeah, there's something really here. I want to do more of this. 2 months wasn't enough of just, 12 plus hours of meditation every day. And so after that, though, I went to India for 6 months, and there was doing a lot of yoga studies, going around India, I did like 2 months with one teacher, a month with another, a month with another. And it was in that time I was also reading a lot of Dharma books, Buddhist books, and just kind of trying to learn more. And at some point I encountered a book by this Burmese monk, Sayadaw U Tejaniya, and who had a very wisdom-oriented approach to meditation as opposed to more of like a focus approach, and just really connected with me. And I just had this sense, oh, this is my teacher. This is what I want to do. And so I finished up those 6 months in India and situated things to be able to go to Myanmar, just indefinite. I made a short visit back home, kind of say hello, goodbye to my family, and then snuck in another retreat in Malaysia, and then went to Myanmar, ended up staying there for a little under 2 years, and there was just very intensive practice. Really, I got to the point, sleeping about 5 hours a day, take your meals, go on alms round. Other than that, it's pretty much just all meditation all the time. Kind of sitting, walking. And so then after that, just to kind of wrap up that era, I came back to the States and spent a season, about 7 months. I was an intern on an organic vegetable farm. Just wanted to do something kind of very embodied and grounded and with other people. And then after that, I moved back to Portland, and kind of, now that's where the start of my current chapter, which has been about a decade now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if I were to encapsulate what it's like to be in your presence, it's mostly grounded. Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. When it comes to, your journey, how did your family feel about you leaving, and how were they supportive? Did they understand?
Well, I remember when I was in India, I had a Skype call with them. It's really funny being on a Skype call from India to the US, because everywhere I would do it, there's lots of horns and loud noises, and it's kind of hard to hear each other. But I had this Skype call with my parents, and I just remember I thought it was just a casual comment about, it's like, yeah, the yoga is pretty good. I wouldn't say I'm like a yoga person, but I'm definitely a Buddhist. And they were like, what? And I was kind of surprised. I was like, I did just live at a Buddhist center. I'm like, you see what I'm doing with my life. But it was, that was a moment it felt like a bomb dropped on them. And yeah, they have a very Christian orientation. And I think they thought I was just exploring, but I would come back at some point. And it started to really dawn on them that wasn't actually what was happening. And then when I wanted to be a monk, they were kind of, I would say, they were supportive but concerned and a little worried. And my mother was concerned she'd never see me again.
Okay.
I think they were concerned over the fate of my soul.
Sure.
I remember my father being concerned about how I was ever going to support myself.
Yeah.
So some of these fairly understandable concerns. My mother definitely didn't like that I was making this life choice, especially for a good chunk of that time. I was really out of contact with anyone too.
Yeah.
But I would say they were still generally supportive. They're like, okay, well, we understand this is your life. This is what you want to do. It's not our choice. We don't necessarily like it, but it's your life. You gotta live that. So I was grateful for that.
And how about now? Has that evolved? Has that relationship evolved as you've deepened your practice and certainly built your life in a different direction than maybe they had originally intended for you? Do they see how it has fed you in the ways that it needed to? Are they more accepting, I guess, at this point? Or do they have more awareness around that? Or
Yeah, I would say at this point we have a pretty good relationship. I think they're still maybe concerned over the fate of my soul.
Okay.
It's just kind of hard to get past that in kind of the mainline evangelical approach. But I think they also see, I don't even think I know, it's had some pretty clear impact on my life and my ability to live in a kind way, ethical way, grounded way, a life of service and support. And so I think they really see that and respect that. And so I think there's just a mutual respect. And we've both, after some years of butting heads, mostly before I even went on that journey in my 20s, I think we've just kind of stopped doing that, realized we're not going to change each other. And can we find some of the overlap? Because they are very spiritual, loving people.
Yeah.
And so instead of focusing on, well, you think this and I think that, and here's where we disagree, the focus is a little more like, okay, where can we come together? And just kind of don't even really go there with the other stuff.
Yeah. Great advice for the world that we live in currently.
Yeah.
You're a leader. You're ahead of your time. Okay, so after 21 months as a monk, what was the biggest internal shift that you experienced?
I'm just reflecting on that. If I think about it now and I look back, there was this very, very deep sense of center that landed with me. It was almost as if that initial insight I had had all those years earlier that started everything, that was like the glimmer, but it was still kind of shaky. Like I knew it, but I was still kind of lost in all my thoughts, and the residue of a lot of bad habits was still there. And so I think after being a monk and those years of intensive practice, that sense of center was just so much more rooted. And through that, this sense of nothing is a problem. It's like, oh yeah, there's these, here's these shame thoughts, and here's this icky feeling, and here's this chaos in the world. And amidst all of that, whether it's internal or external or in relationships, some capacity to see, oh, this is just the things happening. And there's some real kind of ongoing sense of a center to it all that is unimpacted by any of that. And that was really pretty rooted and is really still the basis of my teaching in my life. And I think is really the basis of Buddhism, is to find some way to just not be caught in the sway of all the ups and downs of the world.
Yeah. And how it impacts you.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. I'm going to skip a couple of things. What do you love doing more than anything else?
It's kind of a broad answer, but so in Buddhism, we call the whole corpus of practices and teachings the Dharma. Mm-hmm. So I guess I would say just kind of practicing the Dharma, living the Dharma, sharing the Dharma, which is a little bit broader than just meditating. Something like, offering service, or being kind to someone I like, or being kind to someone I don't like. This real nudging of myself towards what's good and wholesome and beautiful and kind of uplifting. And yeah, sometimes that means just a lot of quiet. Like I just got back from a month-long kind of silent retreat, and how wonderful. I love going on those. But then I'm also married and I live in community, and how wonderful is it to connect with folks in that way. But I guess the center point of it, the thing that I love doing, is not just going through the motions of life, but is really endeavoring to see, how do I really bring myself in every moment in an intentional way. And I think then that naturally really spills over into my work as a teacher. Is on one hand, I love teaching because I'm just talking about and sharing, offering pointers on how to do what I think is the coolest thing. And that really can take a lot of different forms for different people, what they're interested in, where they're at. But something about this commitment and exploration of what is it to live well in a really deep way. I guess that's what I love more than anything.
That's really beautiful. What makes you the happiest?
Well, when I think on the times that I feel very happy, in English that word happy has a lot of connotations, but I think of it more just to mean a very deep well-being. Strip away the sense of it being elated or elevated or whatever, whether we call it contentment or fulfillment or peace or well-being or happy, just some state of goodness. What makes me, pushes me into the deepest state of goodness. When I look, it's actually just the times when my mind is very clear and there's just not a grabbing hold of all the thoughts, emotions, feelings, and events and happenings. And, sometimes that can happen on a meditation retreat. Sometimes that can happen at 6:30 in the morning on a walk around the block. Sometimes it can happen in a traffic jam when I'm just not really bothered by it all. I'm like, oh, I was at the dentist a little while back, and she was poking around in my teeth with that really pointy metal thing, makes your gums bleed. And she really poked me at some point, and I just kind of was jarred and moved really quickly. And she paused, she's like, oh, so how are you doing here? And I said to her, I'm experiencing a pleasant abiding in the here and now. just a humorous phrase I like to use, but I meant it. It was like, well, yeah, I got a little pokey there, but my mind is clear. I'm not caught in the resistance or the disliking. It's just a physiological response. I got poked and my system jumped, but internally I feel very happy. I feel very at ease. And so to me, that kind of happiness that's born internally when the mind isn't covered over and afflicted with all its wants and not wants and all its noise, that is so much richer to me than any sort of adventure or thrill or great meal or experience in nature or anything, because it can happen in any of those. It's not really dependent on that. And I wouldn't say I live my life in this constant state of that, but I would say it's there more than it's not. It kind of comes and goes. And sometimes it feels like it's a little bit deeper than others. Like it's the momentum to it is stronger. The layers of grasping and resisting are subtler that are released. But so the degree to which I can really be like deeply contented and at peace with this moment, that to me is the kind of the happiest.
Do you love going on silent retreat, and why?
Yeah, I would say I do. I really like those. I've been at this point now definitely well over 3 years of my life on silent retreats. Why? Well, it's like I said, what I love most of all, practicing the Dharma. In daily life, there are a lot of things that occupy my attention that I have to do. I have to lead classes and prepare things and write emails and do my bookkeeping and mow the lawn, and some of these things don't really require a lot of bandwidth, and so it's more easy to be in a really intentional place. But some of these things take quite a lot of bandwidth, and it's harder to really kind of be mindful or practice. And so on silent retreats, you basically take all the distractions away, all the duties away, and your only job is just to study your own mind. And so it's just like the clearing away of distraction that I just think is so cool. It's like, oh, I just get to really study the mind and learn how to be in this moment and learn the ways I get in my own way. And I wouldn't say I'm really the most remarkable meditator out there. It's not like I go and have these bliss fests and I'm just like astral traveling and, for me it's a little bit more mundane, but what really is front and center, there's this learning aspect. Like, oh, I'm here to learn. I'm not here to get some special experience. Like, how does this mind work? How do I cause myself suffering? How do I let go? And so even when it's chaotic inside, it's like, okay, well, this is my practice. This is what's here now. Can we look at that? And I just think it's so interesting. And, personally, I find it kind of fun, too. So, and it's generally insightful, too. I come back and there's a lot I carry with me, the momentum into my life that enriches my daily life as well. So it's kind of a win-win on both of those levels.
Do you set an intention when you show up? Do you have a plan? Are you working on something in particular, or are you just going to free your mind? Is it different every time? What does that process look like for you?
I guess where I've landed these days is I don't really set much of a formal intention. So what I realized at some point was the retreat in the mind that was on retreat had its own agenda. And that if David, this willful individual, comes and says, this will be my intention, and then something else arises, it's some other intention or something comes up that I hadn't anticipated, it just feels silly to like hold myself tightly to some intention. And so at this point, I guess I kind of have more of a meta intention in, well, I'm here to really practice sincerely. I'm here to put aside my life that came before, my life that will come after. I'm here to put aside all my fantasies and ruminations and analyses and preferences. And I'm really just here to be mindful, to study the mind, to learn more about how to have a wholesome, peaceful existence. And so that's kind of like an intention that just captures the spirit of Vipassana that can be applied to any given practice or any given unfolding of events. And yeah, there's something in there too that kind of more open intention is in a capacity to be adaptable and flexible. And so it's, maybe there's some times where something really difficult comes up. It's like, maybe I just take a couple minutes, offer myself some kindness. I don't need to just have this really rigid, I need to study this. It's like, well, right now there's just some overwhelm. Let me just give myself a little love. But then other moments, it's like, actually, this is so fascinating to watch the mechanics of shame. Let me see how this comes up. It's not me. It's just this thing happening. And so there's some real commitment to freedom, to wisdom that can take different forms from that kind of core of just real sincere application of practice moment to moment.
What did you love doing as a child?
Let's see. I really liked sports as a kid. So I played a lot of sports. Baseball, basketball, football, soccer. I was outside a lot. I had a lot of energy as a kid, the ADHD thing. Also, as a kid, I really liked reading. I did a lot of reading as a kid.
What did you like to read?
Let's see. I remember one thing that's coming to mind, the Hardy Boys series.
Yeah.
It's like, I think, mystery novels.
Yeah.
I think I read like all of them, and there's, like over 100.
Yeah.
I might be making that up, but that's what my memory is telling me of childhood.
They're the boy version of the Nancy Drew mysteries.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's hard to even remember. I just know I was, I did like the reading for class, and I would do my own books outside of it. In the summers, I would do a lot of reading. I think I have these memories of going to the library with my mother, and I would just leave with a whole pile of books, and I'd read them. I don't even entirely remember what they were. It's like they weren't memorable. It's just the act of like engrossing in a story. So I guess at that time was stories. I didn't really do nonfiction as a child. But then as, a child became teenager, it shifted a bit to video games. And then once I hit college, the video games stopped, and then the reading started back up again.
So what books are you currently reading?
Mostly these days, it's a lot of nerdy Buddhist stuff.
Is it?
Usually. So like right now, I'm kind of reading 2 books. One is a bit more pick up and put down. It's just like part by part. It's a book from the Buddhist monk Ajahn Sucitto. It's kind of his life teachings.
Wow.
And the other is from insight teacher Rodney Smith, Stepping Out of Self-Deception. But I guess I pepper in over the course of the year. I really like spiritual biographies. So I usually read at least a few of those every year. I like to read maybe 1 or 2 novels a year. Just every so often I feel kind of called to just some story. But mostly it's a lot of just Theravada Buddhist jargon stuff that I still find really interesting.
Do you think this is a past life thing for you?
Actually when I was in Myanmar, shortly before my ordination as a monk, a woman came up to me from Vietnam, and she had this pretty wild story to tell me. I'll kind of save the details, but she said that she was my grandmother in a prior life, and my whole family from that prior life was there at the monastery at that time, and she didn't know why. But when she learned I was ordaining, she said, I think it's because we're all here to celebrate your evolution from your lifetime's evolution of becoming a monk now in this one. And so I've generally been pretty agnostic about questions of past lives and future lives, but I hear stories like that, and then I hear other people who supposedly have these very vivid past life experiences, and so it's definitely part of the Buddhist tradition. I guess I'm like, yeah, maybe so. If that's true, I'm sure I've been at this for many lifetimes now, but I don't have personal direct experience of prior lifetimes, so I can't really say for sure.
Okay. Yeah. And thank you for sharing your, vulnerably sharing your beliefs around that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I wasn't necessarily seeing something in particular for you, but it's obvious that this exudes from you. Mm. And to me, it feels like those are the largest gifts that come through or tend to come through. Mm. If you were to believe in past lives, that the things that you really feel called to do are things that you've done multiple times. Yeah. Would make sense. Mm-hmm. It seems to come natural to you. How about that? And maybe that has been, a lifetime practice for you. But yeah, I do think it has something to do with your journey as well. Coming into a family with ADHD, right? Yeah. And the lesson around that for you and for your family. Yeah. Yeah.
And also something I've thought a lot about my parents, even though I've really pivoted from the kind of Christian upbringing, they're very ethical, moral, wholesome people. So
of course,
like, wow, I really had this pretty remarkable training in ethics from day one. And so coming into Buddhism with their ethical teachings was like, oh yeah, I know this is kind of the same thing. Mm-hmm. So I feel like I was very blessed in that sense to have that upbringing. Mm-hmm.
What was it like growing up in your family? Tell me about it.
To be honest, it's I think I've forgotten a lot of it.
Have you?
I think a lot of it at the time, especially coming to like 11, 12, 13, was just pretty painful, those teen years. And I was a bit of a loner growing up, so I spent a lot of time by myself and was pretty quiet. Maybe not the earlier years when I was just a rambunctious, hyper child. I just remember, I was into sports, so I would get taken to all these sporting events and my sporting things. I had one younger brother, and I lament a bit now. We didn't really have much of a relationship growing up. He was 4 years younger than me. And when I was younger, I was, part of the drawback of ADHD mind is you get bored very easily. Yeah. So I was very bored playing with him. Yeah. Because he just, was 4 years younger. Yeah. And then as I got older into my teen years, that's when I really just started, as I shared earlier, check out from life, essentially. And so I didn't really want anything to do with him or basically anyone. And so... yeah, my memory of being younger was generally pretty happy. I was into school, had friends, sports, good relationship with my parents, really involved with the church. And then around those kind of early teen years, just all kind of shifted a bit.
Okay. Was there anything significant that happened in your life that really was the transition period? Or was it just a gradual drift?
It was definitely more of a gradual drift.
Okay.
I think some memories I have laying in bed at night, I remember praying. That's what we did. You'd pray before bed. And this sense started to come in. I was maybe around 12 that it's like, I kind of just feel like I'm just talking to myself. And I was like, and I had some growing self-consciousness that the things I would pray for would be like, Dear Jesus, if you're going to end the world, please wait till Saturday because I really want to play my basketball game on Friday.
Yeah. And
just a sense of how superficial my prayers were. And then I'm just like talking to myself all the time. And something about that, I was like, I don't know. There's something about this doesn't feel
work. Yeah.
like anything that special. I think there was also, I was a bit ostracized socially. I think partly because of the ADHD, partly I had really bad allergies growing up, so I carry this handkerchief around. And with the ADHD, and I think I didn't have as good control back then, so I was a lot more impulsive, and so I got teased a lot. I was also, probably because of the meds, my growth was really stunted, so I was much smaller than everyone. And then I also had this like super Christian family, and so I got kind of picked on for that. And I think some of the effect of that was probably also to want to just turn away from the thing I was getting teased for. And yeah, I don't know. There was just some lack, the shift. Yeah, I think some of my then response to getting picked on and just feeling socially out of place was to just go inward, was to just like kind of shut it all out and disassociate. And so I think that really set in very gradually. And probably something too about going off the meds around that time was it was just a lot harder to like stay focused with stuff and manage it and care. Actually, it was kind of, I had a amusing insight when I was in college, and I would use Adderall as a study drug, only like 5 to 10 times all of college, but I was so focused, and I was like, oh my goodness, this stuff works. Like, wow. It was like I had these memories from my youth. It was like, yeah, no wonder everything kind of shifted when I went off of this. But also I had when I would use Adderall those times, I couldn't fall asleep. And so I was like, oh, I was also an insomniac for like 5 years of my childhood, just laying in bed all night long. It's like, oh, wired. It's like, oh, this is part of the flip side of why I went off, because I couldn't sleep.
Yeah, you just no rest.
Yeah.
Your brain was never allowed to rest.
Yeah.
Incredible. So what are your feelings about medication now?
Yeah, on a broad level, I work with a lot of students, and various people are on various meds. Maybe on an even broader level than the broad level I was going to speak to, I think my general sensibility is, whenever possible, not be on pharmaceuticals and processed foods and all that kind of stuff. But I also recognize they really have their place to play. And so, if anyone's on them and they find them supportive, I'm like, yeah, great. If it's helpful, do it. But what I find a lot of people, they also start to get curious. I wonder what it would be like without this. And they experiment. And sometimes they're like, wow, I don't actually need it. And sometimes they're like, the meds are really helpful. I'm like, yeah, you should probably take them then. And so I guess to me, rather than seeing meds as this like easy solution to all of our problems, they're a tool among many tools. And so I just generally advocate people have a curious approach to it. And if it works, do it. But also maybe experiment things that have less side effects and see what that's like. Maybe that works, maybe it doesn't. So.
I love everything that you share. Okay. I'm skipping. See, I had a lot of questions. But you have been covering a lot of them. Okay, so you describe a meditator's mind as your new baseline after intensive practice. Can you explain what that means and how it translates into everyday life?
Yeah. Well, it's a little bit of what I spoke to earlier of the biggest benefit I got, I would call the meditator's mind. In technical jargon, we'd say to have a non-clinging awareness, be at the center point. But really, in a more lay terms, we could just say that to have a real sense of center that's pretty much always accessible. And yeah, I guess what I would say though with that, to say it's always accessible is maybe different than always doing it. It's like the water right here in front of me is always accessible, but it's not as if I'm constantly drinking from the water. But at any given moment, I'm like, oh, I could just grab that. And so, people who are these great masters who are super highly enlightened, they kind of describe a reality where they're just that's always the center point. It never leaves. But for me, there's this sense, even when some difficult emotion comes or thoughts come up or I'm in some sticky situation, there's a part of me that maybe buys into it. And it's like, this is a problem and this is bad and I don't like this. But there's basically always some deeper recognition, even if it's not the loudest voice in the room, that says, it's just conditions. It doesn't actually matter. And so what I notice is that the more my practice has kind of ebbed and flowed over the years, the times I'm really kind of on fire with it and practicing a lot and there's a lot of momentum, it's like, oh no, I don't really leave that perspective so much. It's the loudest voice in the room just about all the time. And so the strength of that voice comes and goes, but the voice is always there. And yeah, again, it's a way, it's a real aid to just really be grounded and calm and pretty much anything, which it doesn't really, I guess the thing people always ask me is, well, does that mean you're just resigned and you're apathetic and you don't care?
No.
I guess I say to people, well, if you've experienced it, you would know it's an absurd question.
Yeah.
Because to be grounded, it's like if I spilled this water on the floor and I was all frantic and freaking out about it, like, what does that help? I can be really grounded and I can say, hey, Andre, do you have a towel? I kind of want to clean this water up. I made a mess. And so it's kind of like that with life. You can see things, oh, this is a problem, or this is something to attend to, and this isn't. And you can do that from a clearer place rather than just living your life frantically. And so that capacity is very much with me of just, okay, well, this is what's in front of us. What are we going to do without making a big deal out of it?
I love that you share how you handle emotions. Yeah, I think that could be very useful to people listening or watching. Yeah, because it gives you more freedom.
Yeah.
Okay, so many people struggle with being present, especially in a world full of distractions. What advice do you have for cultivating mindfulness in daily life?
When people ask me that question, a lot of students and whatnot, my senses are often looking for a little trick, a tactic. Like, okay, when you enter through a doorway, take a deep breath.
Do you have the magic key, David?
I don't have the magic key. And
Darn it.
Yeah.
There's no magic pill you can't swallow.
There's no magic pill, no, one-time, trick,
So what you're saying is the more you practice, the better you are at it.
Essentially.
Yeah.
It's like, really, it's about a lifestyle thing. It's not just like a one-time thing or something you can tuck into 5 minutes of your day. If you're really sincere in wanting to be present in your life and you make it a lifestyle and you let go of a lot of the busyness that isn't serving you and all the extraneous things pulling at your time and attention, and you make space for some sort of awareness practice. There's a funny joke that everyone should meditate for 30 minutes a day. Unless you're too busy, then you should meditate for 60. It kind of gets at, it's like, well, it's never really about having time or even to some degree remembering. It's like really making it a lifestyle and really like, this is a priority. And sure, all the little tips and tricks, and take some deep breaths when you're suffering, and take a 1-minute pause here and there. Like, those are good. They're going to help, but they don't actually like get you that far in relation to when you really just prioritize a mindful life. Then it really takes off pretty quickly.
Yeah, I would agree. Your practice integrates elements of Zen Buddhism, Vipassana, and classical yoga. How do these different traditions complement each other in your teaching? Well, I think a lot of it just comes down to the sensibility, where really, even in the Vipassana world, the Theravada Buddhist world, there are pretty different styles of practice and pretty different teachers. And so I would say I'm really rooted in my primary teacher, Sayadaw U Tejaniya.
I sometimes, joke in my own head. Maybe it's not a joke, but muse. I'm like 60% Utejaniya, maybe another 20% smattering of other Theravada teachers, and then a little bit of Zen, a little bit of kind of Western psychology, a little bit of yoga, a little bit of non-dual Advaita stuff.
That's right. Don't you have your MA in psychology?
I did my bachelor's, and then I did 3 years of trainings and counseling programs. So I kind of, after my undergrad, where I did this degree in psychology, and I was like, I don't think I really actually understand anything about the mind.
You sound like me after my classes.
Yeah, it was like, this is a waste of, it was cool on some level, but I was like, I actually want to learn something. And so I thought about grad school, but I was like, I talked to people who did it, and they're like, just do these other trainings, these programs. This is where you'll really learn the skills. So I did like the 2-year Hakomi program, and
I looked into Hakomi.
Oh, nice.
Myself.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that. So didn't do the MA, but did quite a lot of training in psychology and counseling, and and so I guess all of those, they just inform the sensibility. And so it's almost tough to say, like, how do they weave in, as there's little bits and pieces that I just picked up from different teachers in the Zen tradition and the yoga tradition, the non-dual, the psychology stuff. And I guess there's this approach I have where I really emphasize a lot of balance and harmony. And so if I sense people, or even when I'm teaching, if I've been teaching for a while, a bit more on the ultimate perspective, like, it's all just conditions, it doesn't matter. And then I'm like, I think I need to balance it out. We need to shift to the other side and be like, your emotions are important. I actually heard a teacher recently say something that I really connected with. He said, if students don't know how to put down emotions and just let them go and not attend to them, he's like, I'm not okay with that. But if they don't know how to pick them up and explore them and feel them and really be with them, he's like, I'm not okay with that either. And so I think all of these different modalities, they just inform this sensibility of how you can kind of harmonize these different parts of what it is to be human, and these kind of depths of the spiritual path, and just kind of point to that center place where it all comes together.
I love listening to you. Okay, let's see. What are you still working on healing?
I guess on some level I would say a lot of the emotional stuff, it's not like it ever really goes away per se. Like, it's not just like, okay, I never get angry again, I never get ashamed again, I never get sad again, but it all just gets subtler and subtler and subtler over time, has been my experience. And so, a number of different threads. Like, I have this person in my life I find very difficult, and so just aversion has been coming up, and just kind of upset and annoyed. So it's, and I guess the approach is like, okay, that's interesting. Let's explore that. What's this about? It's not really about this person. There's something in here that's still stuck. On a more kind of fundamental level, there's something I still, probably just a product of so many years of obsessive thinking, I still just a lot of compulsive thinking in the mind, which revolves around the story of me, essentially. And so
That's how you worded that. Yes.
Yeah. Just a continual healing of that delusion that, like, oh, I am this me and I need to churn these thoughts. And so, just a continual, like, okay, can I learn to just more and more not really buy into all that? It's irrelevant. The shame stuff has been really interesting. That's been a big part of my journey. And I had some pretty profound healings with that years ago. And what I notice now, it still kind of comes and goes in waves here and there, but it's like subtle, whereas it's at the point I can pretty easily just put it down. Like, but I think I find some value. Like, well, wait a minute, what is this that's still like coming up? And one thing, somewhat recently, just the sense of inadequacy or like imposter syndrome. where it can be easy, like, oh, I'm not like this great master who just abides perfectly all the time. And like, who am I to be like teaching, or who am I? I've been practicing for this how long? I'm not, astral traveling, or I actually don't care about astral traveling. But
you don't seem like you
yeah.
do.
No, but there can just be this sense of the comparing mind that comes up and compares myself to some ideal, and then what results is some sense of
where you're supposed to be.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so that can still arise. And yes, I think there's a lot of these threads, but I guess like I was saying earlier, I think this point of emotional work for me is really interesting, or healing, because earlier on I would just get overwhelmed by this stuff really easily. And so a lot of it would just be like, how do I tread water amidst this? And it feels like I'm basically past, and who knows, it could come back, but it's been a long time since I felt like I needed to tread water. And so this stuff comes up, but there's enough resource and enough center to like, oh, this is here, okay. And I can just meet it and kind of work with it and explore it. And when appropriate, just put it down. But so yeah, there's still plenty to heal in there. But it's a very fun part of the healing journey.
I love your honesty. And the fact that you give yourself time to answer. And that you're just very gentle. You're very gentle and loving with yourself. So it's really wonderful to watch you speak, and then how you thoughtfully answer things.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You've written about the pain in your heart when witnessing suffering in the world, whether personal, political, or global. How can we work with this pain without becoming overwhelmed or numb?
Yeah. One way I think about it is if you imagine the pain you feel, the anxiety, the stress, the aversion, the anger, whatever form it takes. I think of it on a 0 to 10 intensity scale. And when it's pretty high, it's like over, say, a 7 or 6 or 8 or whatever your zone is. When you feel like you're a bit overwhelmed and dysregulated, usually the time to do is to just ground and resource. And so, talk to a friend, take a nap, take a bubble bath, do something that's soothing or relaxing, maybe put on some music and just meditate and just listen to the music. And so there's a time to just really ground and say, actually, I need to put that down and not think about it and read this and just take a break. But when the intensity is a bit lower, a lot of it is really just meeting it. This is the central practice of Buddhism and these meditative traditions, is just to mindfully notice, oh, it's like this. Pain is here. And there can be pain, but that doesn't mean we have to hate it and we have to grab hold of the stories and run with them. It's like, yep, thinking is happening. Pain is here. Anxiety is here. Can I breathe? Can I ground? Can I just, yep, that's here. I can let it go. And so it's, in some level, in this conventional word we use, it points to a really deep acceptance. Like, it's like this now. Inside, it's like this now. Out there, it's like this now. And at some point of spiritual practice, we learn that all of our upset doesn't actually help anything. And so I think of it like meditative practice is essentially like a 2-step model. Step 1 is you just accept what is. And then step 2, kind of like I was saying earlier with if I spilled the water. Step 2 is, well, is there something to do? Okay, there's all this stuff going on in the world. Is there actually something to do? Maybe you're going to the thing to do is just talk to a family member. Maybe the thing to do is sign up for some community service thing. Maybe there is nothing to do. Maybe you're already doing a lot. You're maybe raising a family, or you're a caretaker, or you whatever you do. And so in that sense, when we really realize that, oh, like I can't do everything. I can just do my little part. What I've found in myself is so much of the frustration just starts to drop away because there's a clear scene, like that doesn't help anything. But usually what happens is like, well, I don't like that answer. I want it all to be fixed. I want everything to be the way that I want it to be. And in spiritual practice, it's really a training in seeing that's not how it works. and coming to terms with that, and there can be some grieving involved in that process. But that surrender, it's just so much of that drops away. And then when the pain arises, it's just pain. I can meet pain. I don't need to make a story out of it. I don't need to make it personal. I don't need to lash out at someone or create some division or yell at people, or it's just pain. And I can handle that in a responsible, caring, respectful way.
You mentioned titration as a skill for processing difficult emotions. Can you explain how it works and why it's important, especially for those with trauma?
Yeah. I guess to some degree we could point to what I just said with the 0 to 10 scale. And when we are more activated, the more intense emotions, it's just a time to ground and just don't worry about processing or dealing with anything. And when the emotions are more workable, they're not quite so intense, the practice of titration in a mindful meditative context, it's to say, okay, say for example, anxiety is here. You just start with that simple statement, anxiety is here, and it's like, well, how do I know? What am I seeing in the mind or the body? And we don't focus on the storyline so much, at least not initially. It's just thoughts are here. Okay, there are thoughts. What's going on in the body? And maybe there's some tension in the chest, there's a fluttery, restless feeling, whatever it is. We go to that. We just linger with it. We feel it. We notice it. We sense it. We be with it. Not in this way where we need to like possess it and grab hold of it and make this big thing about it. But it's just like, just relax with it. Just notice it. Okay, it's like this. And the more we can do that, and then the thoughts come, like, yep, the thoughts are happening. Just out of the thoughts into the body. Feel the body. Notice the body. So much of our healing comes just through that simple practice. And then the titration is when the intensity starts to balloon up or the thoughts get really loud and overpowering.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, ground. This isn't the time to do that anymore. Or say something's been triggered and some trauma response comes up. It's like, okay, this isn't the time to feel it anymore. Pivot to something safe. So, some people, they feel their feet. They look at a plant. They hear the sounds. Just kind of open the senses. Don't just myopically kind of get sucked into the thing that's overwhelming you. Pivot out. And then the titration process, once you ground a little bit, well, then you come back in. It's like, oh, yeah, okay, ground. Yeah, okay, I can feel this now. And then you get triggered again, and then you zoom back out. And the titration is you just go back and forth.
Thank you for that. What is the role of compassion both for ourselves and others when navigating painful emotions?
It's said that compassion or love or these heart qualities, they're like aloe vera on a burn. And so if you rub aloe vera, say you got a 2nd-degree burn on your arm, you rub aloe vera on it, it soothes it. It doesn't make the pain go away, but it soothes it. It feels a little bit more cool, a little bit more easeful. And so it's said with difficult emotions, it's kind of, compassion is like aloe vera. It's like it just soothes it. It makes it a little bit more bearable. It tenderizes it. And in Buddhism, they say that like 2 wings of a bird, we need both compassion and wisdom. And wisdom is the look at, well, what's this suffering about? Is there some way I can release it? And compassion is, can I bring some of that soothing energy to this? And there are times when ourself or another person has a lot of suffering, when it seems like the soothing is the most important response. It's like, let's really lead with compassion. And there are times when the suffering doesn't feel quite so overwhelming or quite so sticky, where the wisdom is more the appropriate response. And really what I find, the more our practice goes on, they start to get fused together a bit more. There isn't such a big distinction. It's like, oh yeah, I kind of lean a little this way or a little that way, or maybe they're both here. Maybe it's just that the environment of the mind is a kind, compassionate place. And so from that, some suffering comes up. I can say, oh yeah, I'm holding this with a care of tenderness. And in that, I can see, and this is just pain. Like, it's not mine, it's not personal, it's just pain, which is the wisdom perspective. And so they can really work together. Essentially, the two wings of the bird are helping you just release suffering. Sometimes it's the soothing releases it. Sometimes it's the wisdom. And I would say, though, with other people, I definitely lean a lot more compassion, because people don't usually, and especially in a more social context, they're not trying to have you give them some great discourse on the Four Noble Truths or wisdom. Sometimes with students more so, when they come to me in that sort of formal role, then I kind of gauge it out and see which direction is more appropriate. But in my personal life, I usually just lead a lot more of the compassion. That's usually the medicine that's more wanted in a equal footing relationship.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It certainly has helped me. Mm-hmm. It helps the people I work with. Mm-hmm. Okay, let's see. What's one topic you could talk about for hours?
Well, it's kind of cheating in a way, but the Noble Eightfold Path. It's kind of like the teaching of Buddhism that encompasses all of the teachings. So it's by design. It's like, we're just going to have this kind of mega list that all of the teachings fit into this mega list. And so I think of my own practice and teaching more and more as just, I'm just practicing the Eightfold Path. This is what I share with people. This is what I practice. I didn't make this up. This is front and center in the Buddha's first teaching. He's like, I've discovered this Noble Eightfold Path that leads you to the end of suffering, to well-being, to freedom. And so, it's a great teaching. Could definitely go on about that for some while.
Is that kind of the foundation of what you teach generally?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. You live family style in Portland with your wife, you mentioned, and her sister and a dear friend, and your dogs. Mm-hmm. How does your community and relationship factor into your path?
Let's see. Well, I think in my early 30s, when I moved back to Portland, I was really interested in living more of a community-oriented life. And I think this came a product of what I described with my teen years and into college. And my 20s, I was very solitary. I had friends and whatnot, but I definitely was much more internal, introverted. And then the 4-year spiritual journey I did was also quite introverted. You're meditating mostly. And so coming back to Portland, and that year I spent on that farm, really just had this sense, I think it's important for me as someone who is inclined towards introversion to just live with other people and more steep myself in communities. And so this has been, for the past decade, something I've really been cultivating and steeping in. And on a lot of levels, I think living with people, you brush up against each other sometimes. And so rather than seeing life as, I want to get my way all the time, can I learn how to live in harmony with people who don't have the same ideas I do? I think it's really beautiful practice. But then there's also just a sweetness to it. It's like, you kind of connect and you come together and you see each other in these not formalized moments. It's just like over breakfast, or you catch each other in the living room for a few minutes. And so right now, maybe some of the difference of what I'm doing these days at home is we have a very cohesive home. We share meals together and we spend a lot of time together. A lot of my time in my 30s, which for anyone who has spent much time living in this kind of contemporary model of urban co-living, it's kind of, what's the word? It's not so cohesive. Like my experience was I'd have these roommates and maybe we'd catch each other here and there, but we were kind of all doing our own thing and we'd catch each other by happenstance. And I usually liked the people I lived with, but it didn't feel so like a home or a family. Whereas now it's very much like, being together is one of the center points of all of our lives, and we've chosen that. And so it's just this extra level of sweetness, and just a lot of my social needs get met in my own house. There's 4 of us, and it's to me, this whole American idea contemporary idea of, once you're successful, you'll go like live out on your own or just with your nuclear family or whatever. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Maybe if I wanted to be a monk or live a more monkish life and meditate all the time, then yeah, sure. But it's so nice to live with people. Like, we're meant to live with people.
Yeah.
And so I find it very nourishing to do that.
I agree. It's the only way that we learn how to relate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally.
It can't relate when you're, you can relate to yourself. You can be introspective about how you relate, but you can silo yourself essentially from not ever really taking a look at how you relate if you don't give yourself opportunity to relate and bump up against people. Yeah. So you can have more awareness around how and why and be curious about it.
Yeah.
Okay. You committed to a vegan lifestyle, ethical consumption, and mindful living. How do these choices align with your spiritual practice?
Well, in Buddhism, Eightfold Path, there's this section on sila is the word in Pali. We usually just translate as ethical conduct, moral conduct, virtuous conduct. It's in the Eightfold Path, a third of it bundles into that category. And so there's this really traditional way they would talk about it in terms of kind of legalistic language, and it means this and that and the other thing. But to me, that section of the path is really just about harmonious living. It's about living in the world of relationship, not just with other people, but in relationship with nature, in relationship with a floor, in relationship with objects, in relationship with a bed, a blanket, and of course other people, relationship with ourself. And so it's, how do I treat the world? How do I show up with care? And I'll share this story I rather like. I was just thinking about this the other day, kind of fits here. The story about Katagiri Roshi, who's this very well-known Zen master. And before he died, someone came to him and asked him, I forget the exact question, but it was something like, what is the point of Zen practice? Which is one of these big questions you ask a Zen master when they're about to die. And so there was a cup on the table next to him, and he picked it up and he just kind of threw it down. And then he picked the cup back up, and with two hands he cupped it very gently and he placed it on the table. And he said, there's a way you can live your life like I handled that first cup, and there's a way you can live your life like I handled that second cup. He said, Zen practice is about living your life the second way. And to me, that's this thing like, so why mindful consumption? Why put a lot of intentionality into my diet or emotional work or my financial choices? Well, it's because I want to live my life like he handled that second cup. And we see the spiritual life isn't just about some exotic mystical experiences or finding some sense of center that's detached from all of this. That's important, but so is this. They're on equal footing. I sometimes think of them like legs of a stool. You take any one of them away, it all falls apart. And so to me, it's really putting a lot of intentionality into how I conduct myself in the world of humans and nature. And physicality is, it's just as front and center as anything else.
Let's see. How do you feel we can incorporate more love for ourselves and for the world around us?
Yeah, again, I'm kind of struck by, I'm sure there could be a lot of like simple things that I could say, like, here, do this one thing.
You don't have a pithy
for 3 minutes a day, or whatever. Do this one little practice, and it will change everything. But it just feels to me like to give a real answer to that question that is impactful. It's just a big commitment. It's a life undertaking. Like you don't just take a pill and be more loving to yourself. I think that a lot of the things of our world are pretty toxic in the contemporary discourse. even beyond the political situation, even just like consumerism, this notion that you're going to find your well-being through like having stuff or having experiences or accumulating. There's so many of these hidden delusions in our society that to embark upon a spiritual path, when we unwind those, like love just happens naturally. It's like, oh, my worth isn't dependent on my status, my bank account, what I've done or where I've been or what I have. I'm already enough. And so, something even as simple like if you meditate for 10 minutes a day, something that simple, we're starting to rewire your mind a little bit to see, oh, I can actually be already enough just sitting here. And so if I'm already enough just sitting here, I guess that means all that stuff my society is telling me is just a bunch of lies. And so there's some real unraveling that has to happen of our ideas about what love actually means, and that I just love this phrase I sit with a lot, already enough. To really take in already enough. You're not doing a loving kindness meditation or a mindfulness meditation to get to be loving. It's to like unravel the baggage of it to see already enough. And so, like I said, though, it takes commitment. Like you're not just going to stumble your way into that with like one meditation or one book or whatever, because the wiring and the conditioning and the programming is quite deep. And so it takes time and it takes commitment, but it's absolutely possible.
Yeah, I agree. I tell people, did you learn how to ride a bicycle in a day?
Totally. Yeah,
you probably skinned your knees and cried and maybe even ran into a tree. And you probably didn't get it right on the first day. So you've had 40 years to practice it this particular direction. Maybe give yourself more than a couple of days the other direction.
Totally.
What is the most unexpected lesson you've learned on your journey?
Yeah, there's so many things I could speak to. It's kind of hard to pick something because now in retrospect, all of it feels like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I remember like something when I was 19 and I started reading these spiritual books. One of the first ones I read, they said something like, "You are not your mind," or "You are not your thoughts." And I remember upon first reading it, I thought it was ridiculous. It's like, of course I'm my thoughts. But then at some point, I deepened my meditative practice and I realized it's true. I have some pretty deep insights, and that was very unexpected. Here's one that's maybe this is a good answer. I was so allergic to religion and ritual and anything devotional when I started to come out of Christianity. And for a lot of years, what I was drawn to in Buddhism was... Well, I was drawn specifically to teachers that didn't really do that sort of stuff. It was just a bit more wisdom, meditation. Maybe it was there, but it was like, oh yeah, that's just a kind of side thing. And I still think my orientation, and I think why feedback I get from people a lot about teaching is they like that I don't do a lot of that stuff. And I think that's just what's resonated with me over a lot of my life. But when I go to monasteries now or just engage with my own Buddhist practice, I actually find all of those aspects really heartwarming now, and I find them kind of sweet. I relate to them a little bit like poetry. It's like, oh, this is kind of fun. We're doing this chanting thing and the bowing and the ritual, and there's this devotional thing, and that really surprised me because when I was younger, I was like, ugh, get me away from any of that. No, I just find it kind of sweet, and it has this uplifting quality. So I guess I would say that.
Okay. If someone is just beginning their path of self-discovery in mindfulness, where would you recommend they start?
Well, I often point people to an intro book. Gil Fronsdale wrote this book called The Issue at Hand. kind of like a general intro to mindfulness, insight meditation, Buddhism, just a very nice brief overview. And so I said, yeah, check that out. And there's something really powerful about just a consistent daily practice. Just starting out, maybe take 10 minutes a day. And if you prioritize it, it's actually very easy to fit in 10 minutes a day. Mm-hmm. So just getting in the habit of that, really emphasizing just a very relaxed, receptive approach, not trying to get somewhere, accomplish something, be something. Just kind of relax into it, be consistent, and having some sort of social support, whether that's finding some meditation community, finding a teacher, could be online, could be in person. You don't really, the teacher itself, especially early on, isn't super important, but just like some other people around you. I find there's a lot of temptation now with apps, and those can be helpful to get people started, but I've yet to meet anyone, well, maybe they're out there, they're just still in their closet or wherever, but people don't really, we're wired socially. It's really hard to maintain this lifestyle over the long run by ourselves.
Yeah.
And so the apps can be nice to get started, but for longevity and sustainability and deepening, as we're inspired by other people, we're supported by them, mm-hmm. And it just adds another layer of richness. So yeah, just getting started, maybe having a little bit of reading or content to kind of give you some sense of direction, and other people are probably what I would say.
Great advice. What's one practice or piece of wisdom you'd love for anyone listening to take with them today?
Well, one of the teachings that really early on was very prominent in some of my big openings that I still feel like is prominent is seeing that there's this difference between something like I am anxious and anxiety is happening. Or, I am sad or sadness is happening, or my shoulder hurts versus pain is happening. And this is way beyond just like a little linguistic trick. It's something that when you have some experience of mindfulness or awareness, you can really see, oh, this is just sensation in the shoulder. And the impact of not taking it personally, not taking ownership, is you see you don't have to react the way you always have. You can respond, say, oh, this is painful, but this doesn't mean I need to be mean to my sister. I can say, oh, there's some anxiety here, or there's some anger here. That doesn't mean I need to go yell at this person. This doesn't mean I need to go have a couple shots of whiskey. It's just a feeling. And so really taking in deeply, I often tell people, just whatever's happening, just even say to yourself, this is happening. Sounds are happening. Pain is happening. Shame is happening. It's just a thing happening. It's not you. It's not personal. You can pair with that some deep breaths or whatever helps. But the more you internalize that message, which isn't, it's something I think is accessible for beginners, but is also something people who are very advanced are still practicing. It's really the center of this. Like, it's just a thing happening. Like, how you respond is, you can choose how you respond if you can start from the place of seeing it's not about you, it's just a thing happening.
Why do you think it's challenging for most people to acknowledge their feelings?
I suspect, because I've met people over my life who it's really not challenging for. And so I suspect a big part of that has just something to do with societal conditioning. And that, like, I never really got any education growing up on how to be with emotions. I didn't really get educated on what they are, on how to feel them, how to work with them. There were certain emotions that subliminally were kind of okay to feel and certain ones that weren't okay to feel. As a boy in the United States growing up in the 80s, 90s, crying was not okay.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of our emotional ineptitude culturally comes from the total lack of not just education, but like okayness with it.
Yeah.
I suspect there are a lot of other reasons too. It can be painful to be with painful feelings, and it's easier to just find some quick fix than it is to go through the long, messy process of dealing with them.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so a lot of factors, but I think that just the education and the normalization of them is probably the deepest one.
I think I'm going to end it there. We answered everything that I had.
Wonderful.
I was trying to see if there was anything else, but we're kind of just honing in on some of the same valuable lessons or wisdom or insight or advice. So I really want to thank you for sharing. Thank you for everything that you embody. Thank you for your practice and your teachings. Thank you for your time and sharing it with anyone who's listening. I really appreciate it. I learn from you every time I read something or listen. So I really appreciate that. And yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Yeah, I'm very grateful. I can't wait for this to air. It's going to be wonderful.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Thank you so much for tuning in and supporting this podcast. Your presence here means the world to me, and I'm truly grateful for your time and energy. If this conversation resonated with you or sparked any questions, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. I love hearing from each of you. Your insights, experiences, and curiosities always enrich this space. It's important to remember that trauma, often unseen and unacknowledged, can keep us from living fully in our joy. Through my intuitive healing process, I help release the weight of generational trauma, empowering you to reconnect with your true self and experience life in greater harmony. If you feel called to explore this deeper work, I invite you to book a one-on-one intuitive session or even embark on a personalized journey with a Phoenix Immersion, a 2-day retreat designed to support profound transformation. You can find all the details below. For those who've liked, subscribed, or left comments already, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Your engagement means everything, and I'm deeply grateful for the connection we're building in this community. If you haven't subscribed yet, please consider doing so. I'm excited for all the healing and transformation we'll continue to explore together. As always, I'm forever grateful for you, and I cannot wait to see what unfolds next. Take care, and until next time.